If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything that you need all in one place. Let me explain. Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on any listening platform like Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many, many more. It's everything that you need to make a podcast all in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. Download the Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started. From Battlefield Studio Alpha, welcome to the Wartime Leadership Podcast, where we explore what spiritual resiliency looks like from different perspectives. We often focus on the physical, emotional, and social areas of resiliency, but too often we neglect the spiritual pillar. Now, this looks different for everyone. We will be exploring what spiritual resilience looks like in the lives of our guests, who are people from all different walks of life. I'm your host, Nathan Coy, and today's episode is sponsored by Success Draft, where we help you transform your dreams into drafted plans. Head over to successdraft.com to get started on your future today. Today, we welcome Dr. Vic Manzo. Dr. Vic, how you doing, sir?
Brother, I'm absolutely amazing. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, hey, it's great. I know you're waking up in the mountains. I'm waking up near the beach. Between you and I think we have a pretty good subset here.
I would 100% agree with you, brother.
Well, hey, it's been a wonderful conversation just between you and I, even leading up to this moment. So I'm really looking forward to this because your story, what I know about your story is very interesting. Just the transition and the way that life has taken you. So I'm really looking forward to that. But before we get started with that, we have random questions from the random question generator. What was a situation that you were initially thought was terrible, but ended up being a blessing in disguise?
Ooh, that's a good question. There's a lot of those. It's one I share this in my book too. It's my first one. It's the financial hardship that I went through when I started my business. When I thought that, not to get too deep into this, but I ended up going bankrupt at one point, and I fought that for a whole year. On the other side of that, it was the biggest blessing I could ever go through because it showed me all this conditioning in my mind that led to the point of what created that. And there was other things I had to work through, but that came up too. But I was just like, this wasn't as bad as people say it is. And holy cow, look what I'm getting out of this process. And so what I thought I was going to be and how I was going to view and thought myself as a failure and all that, totally was not any of that. And on the other end of it, it was really more of like, I don't know, it was just a blessing. It showed so many blocks I had within me.
And I think that there's a lot of resilience within that of if I can go through this, if I can experience this and still have an outcome that I do, I've conquered.
100%, man. It's one of those things I look back, and that's another thing too, is like, I look back and it gave me more confidence. Like I went through that and I'm like, I'm never going back there. And I know what caused it. So now I know I won't go back there.
Oh, nice. Really good way of putting that. Question number 2. Who is your favorite band or musician?
Oh, there's so much. My music background is so diverse. You know what? Mark Anthony. I'll go with that one. Love his voice, love his energy. When he sings, man, he sings right from the heart.
Wow. I mean, that's a good one. I got to give it to you. That's actually probably one of the best answers I've had. I guess that was a follow-up question that was randomly generated. How many siblings do you have?
I have one amazing sister who's 4 years older than me.
All right. And these really are actually completely random to say the least. What is your greatest fear?
Oh man, greatest fear I have. Not living my truth, not be able to express all the not ending up living on E. So basically, when my time comes to transition, I didn't give it my all.
Regrets.
Yep, I want to live a life without any regrets. So far, I've been doing good at 39, but as long as I keep this mentality, I should be pretty good.
Well, remember, don't get the tattoo. No regrets. Just, Snickers, right? What is one thing that Dr. Vic finds repulsive?
Repulsive. Things that annoy me, things that frustrate me. And there's a couple things that go underneath my skin. I'm just going to go with thinking for others, being courteous of others around you. I see so much of it now. Like when I go to a store and someone's just in a rush and they're like, cut me off and going this way, or it's like, just take a deep breath, everyone. I know. I see where people are in their life. I'm just like, just take a deep breath. Like there's no rush. Slow down. Let's be courteous of other people, not all about where we need or what our wants are. We all have places to go. It's like traffic. If we live more like Japan does, I think it's Japan, yeah. They don't have traffic because they're very courteous of each other and they work with each other when it comes to traffic. So things always keep moving. Where here in our way, we're always jamming things up and all these other things. But that's a whole nother story. I'll leave it at that.
Well, that is absolutely very true. And having been in the Japanese culture for a few years, it really was quite amazing to see the teamwork that came out of and in that environment. So, all right. Hey, I think this is it. It's already been good with the random questions that came up and populated. So how about if we work a little bit into your background, where you came from, go back as far as you want, kind of bring us up to some of those major life decisions you and your family made here in the last few years.
Yeah, I love it. I'm originally from a suburb in Chicago, Illinois. I was born and raised a little small town called Melrose Park. It was a big Italian community at the time. I'm 100% Italian, but long story short, very blue collar. And, my parents did a great job of showing me what I didn't want in life. My dad worked a couple jobs. My mom worked 2 to 3 jobs and just to make ends meet. And my dad, ever since I was a young kid, 6 years old, he used to do carpet on the side outside of his full-time job. I guess they'll call that a side hustle nowadays. And it was one of the things where he wanted me to work. It was long days, long hours, weekends. I'm gone we didn't know. Sometimes it was 6 hours, 8 hours, 12. And if I asked my dad, hey, how long is this going to be? He's like, when we get done. Okay, that's a good answer. I need a time frame, but all right. But he would always say, I'm going to show you what hard work is so that way you don't do what I do. I mean, the guy didn't even teach me how to lay carpet. I mean, let's just put it that way. That's how much he didn't want me to know the craft. He wanted to keep me away from it, but just show me how much the struggle and the long hours and how much we're missing out on things. But when my journey, I started as a chiropractor. So to get to that point, my mom's a fitness instructor. She's been for 37, 38 years. She was a yoga instructor for over 20 now. And it's one of the things I've always seen health as someone who works out, someone who takes supplements, eats right, makes shakes, all that. My mom used to take blend up stuff. She would have a juicer. She was doing this way before it was popular. I think Jack LaLanne is the one that inspired her on juicing. And it was one of those things where I grew up seeing that. Now, I didn't follow that. Green juice, me as a kid, heck no, I was addicted to sugar. I wanted cake and Doritos and all that stuff. But at 13 years old, it was a point in my life where I was always told I was a husky kid. My mom's like, you have a natural belly. What the heck's a natural belly? I mean, I know what she was saying now. I just had an extended lower back that makes my stomach stick out. So it looks like I have, a belly, but I don't. But it's one of those things where at 13, I was like, hey, Mom, I want to have a 6-pack. I used to walk through the magazine aisle and always see the 6-packs of the guys at Muscle Fitness app, magazines and so forth. I was like, can you show me that? So long story short, 2 years later, I got into fitness, working out. And then 2 years later, I had a 6-pack. At 16, I started to teach myself nutrition, but here's where things got interesting. At 19, I went away to Arizona State and I was playing rugby on their club team. And every month, my health was starting to decline. Like I had acne on my back, cold sores every month, couldn't see, sensitivity to light, digestive issues. I started to get I had a little bit of jaundice going on every once in a while. I had bloating and inflamed all the time. There's a whole long list of stuff. But after almost a year, I remember I was coming back home and I told my mom, I need to see a medical doctor. I have way too many systems involved. I think I have like a blood disorder or something. Here's a guy who can run a 5-minute mile. I could bench press. I could bench double my weight, over double my weight. I can lift amounts of weight. And so from a fitness, again, the reason why I'm sharing that is not to impress anything. I'm just trying to share that my background was health is fitness, exercising, eating right, and supplements. So here I am doing all that to the T. And I was in the best shape of my life from a conditioning standpoint, not physically. And so long story short, she's like, hey, almost the time to get to that appointment, it took about a month to get there. And my mom's like, hey, why don't you go see Dr. Frank? And that was a chiropractor I saw when I was a kid. She's been seeing him since I was 1 year old. And I was like, hey, can he help me? Blah, blah, blah. Long story short, I go, yes, I get in. My whole life changes. He says, I can help you get rid of all your symptoms in 2 months. You're going to see a chiropractor the rest of your life. You're going to have to give up on rugby, which was that really hurt because it was a sport I never played before, but yeah, there was a brotherhood to it. And I just loved the camaraderie that came from it, the respect, the things that they follow no matter what. I really appreciated that. So I had to give it up. But long story short, after that, 2 months later, I'm in the best shape of my life. I have no symptoms. I'm feeling great. I'm sleeping well. I'm feeling well rested, energized. And I got down to 10% body fat. Don't ask me. I didn't do anything different except chiropractic. And that inspired me so much that I decided to get out of computers, move back home to Chicago, finish up my degree there in business, and then start my journey to become a chiropractor. And that's what kind of instilled me, because I was like, there's so many people suffering in the world. They need to know about this. They need to know what chiropractic actually can do. And that got me that's where my journey started in chiropractic school. I went to Dallas, completed that. And then, that's when I came. Then I moved back to Chicago to start my practice and my journey of where I was. And I was doing that for the first, I did that for the last 11 years, and it's been a blast. I love chiropractic. It's one of the most kept secrets about health. Now, you may say, well, a lot of people say, well, the chiropractic's exposed and insurance cover. We know. The problem is chiropractic is so misunderstood. And I won't make this all about chiropractic, but a lot of people think it's for neck pain, back pain, and headaches. It has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with any symptom, any illness, any condition. We don't treat anything. So people when they hear that, and I used to tell this to my patients on day one, like when I'm in a consult with them towards the end, I'm like, listen, I want you to understand that chiropractic does not treat any symptom, illness, condition, or disease. And I get the deer in the headlights look like, what the heck am I doing here? And then once I explain it to them, they're like, okay, that makes sense. And so it's the key aspect of just enhancing healing and so forth, just to keep it short. But after a while, about 5 years, I hit my financial peak. This is where I was so burned out. Every 4 to 6 months, I was exhausted and fatigued because what I was doing, because again, I told you, my parents did a great job of showing me what I didn't want. I saw financial struggle as a young kid. I didn't want that. I grew up with around me too. I did not want that. So my drive was always to be financially stable. Unfortunately, in 2 years, it didn't work with the Rocktober hitting in 2008, 2009. By 2010, banks were not being friendly when it came to student loans. I had a lot of those. To where my business wasn't growing as fast as I needed it to, because I just put everything on credit cards. I was very ambitious. And so long story short, that's why I had to go bankrupt. But it was either let the business go and give up on my dreams, or go bankrupt personally, and it'll give me some breathing room. I was able to almost make ends meet if I did that. And I was like, it's worth doing that. If I had the mindset I had now, I would never have done it. But I went through it. But long story short, 5 years in, I hit financial peaks and, except being burned out because I was studying the best chiropractors, the best business advice, self-help, personal development. I was doing everything I could. They said, top CEOs read 60 to 80 books a year. I'm like, fine, I'm going to read 80 to 120. I hit 132 1 year. I was listening to podcasts, video downloads. I was always constantly, I didn't listen to music. I was just constantly focused on growing the business. And what happened was when I got burnt after this point, I just realized I created a business. It wasn't the business I wanted, the chiropractic office that I wanted. And it was really an awakening moment. I told my wife, if this is how it's going to be, I thought this is a lot of money. This is crazy how much money we have, but yet I feel unfulfilled. If this is how it is, and I'm always fighting upstream, I want to give up then. I'm going to let go. I don't think this is worth it for me. And my wife, being very supportive, was like, whatever, we'll figure this out. So long story short, we did some soul seeking. And then I said, you know what? I want to go into pediatrics. The kids need it more than anything. And I want to be able to help correct these things. I don't want to just work with ADHD and autistic kids and all this stuff. I want to solve that before it happens, or give at least the best chance to not let that happen in the first place. Working with moms and dads, or traditional couples that are looking to have a child, and I could work with them prior to that. So then we can minimize some of those things, and then work with pregnant women and so forth. So, but then I was like, well, my practice is not aligned to be that way. And it's not a lifestyle practice is what I really wanted. So I had to go, and I took a 40% hit financially, which in 6 months, we were letting go of patients that just didn't fit the model. And if they didn't want to commit to that, that was perfectly fine. We love on them, and we just referred them to someone else so they had someone to follow up with. But in that moment, this is where I gave up on all the stuff I learned business-wise and all the things I was told to do and everything. And I started to tap into my own power. All the things I knew from the past about spiritual laws, universal laws, quantum physics, neuroscience, mindset, all that stuff. And this is where I started to create something called effortless success. Because from that moment on, in a year to year and a half, about a year and a half, give or take, we hit back to our financial peak. But I was working 50% less than what I was before. I was starting to determine what success meant to me. My relationship started to blossom even more than it could. Not like my marriage wasn't great. It can always improve, and it just wasn't at the level of our satisfactions that we can take it to the next level. Health-wise, all that stuff. Long story short, that's what started to have me shift into coaching a little bit, where I was like, you know what? Entrepreneurs need to know this, because all they're told is to do all the day long. We do this, and we do this already with our own lives, but entrepreneurs do this even more. I was caught into that trap. And as I started to talk to more entrepreneurs in the community and so forth, I started to see the trap and the conditioning of how we're supposed to do all the time. And I was like, you know what if I can help entrepreneurs really live and create success effortlessly? What if I can teach them spiritual truths and other elements and be able to help them, to show them how they can step in true into their power, create spiritual resilience and things like that. And so I started doing it part-time. And then after, 3.5 years in, my wife and I were deciding to move to Knoxville, Tennessee eventually. And then we finally decided to do that. And then just last year in December, we made the move. But unfortunately, due to the climate of what was going on with COVID, especially in Illinois, if I had a practice in like Tennessee, Florida, or Texas, it would have sold immediately. But in Illinois, the chiropractors were leaving the state, not going to the state. And so we decided it came to a point where we weren't getting as many buyers, a year and a half almost into it, and we wanted to start a family. And we literally made a point in our life that said we can either sit here in Chicago and be unhappy and not be fulfilled what we want, or we can go ahead and make that move and let the practice go. And so we decided to let the practice go, and we made the move. And that's where I started my full time now into coaching and everything else I'm doing.
See, and that's absolutely amazing to be able to make that decision. It's very, very hard to make life decisions that are just encompassing yourself. But when you have a partner, or when you have patients, even because you were invested in your patients, you could not have been.
Oh, massively. I mean, just the town itself too. I mean, we, is one of the things that we did so much in the beginning of our careers. We did a ton. They always say after a while you get burned out and you pull away from a little bit, like the chamber. My wife was part of the business association because we met in the same town. So we both worked in the same town. But it was one of those things where we still, even though we may not have been present there, we still were invested in our town and our community, trying to empower it. And especially my patients, they're a family to me, big time family. I mean, people would read our reviews and be like, these aren't standard reviews. These are not like, oh, great, this helped me with this or this. It's like they're couple, 2, 3. Some of them are a page long reviews. And I'm like, that's the type of reviews I want, because that's the experience I'm trying to create for people when they come here.
Now, when you said that you went specifically into pediatrics with pediatrics chiropractic care, what did that look like? I know you said that you wanted to get ahead of the ADHD. You wanted to get ahead of the different types of diseases and muscular structure things that were out there. What did that look like for you in making that transition?
It was really, it was setting. So this is what I kind of teach in my business stuff. It was like setting a vision, right? So it was 2016 and it's December. And I'm literally looking at my wife. We're talking about, because we plan out every year. We'll go on the 1st of December and plan out our whole entire next year. My wife worked in the office with me, and it was one of those things where we looked, and she's like, "Well, what do you want this next year? I mean, we're making changes. What do you want?" And I was like, this is how I created it. So I just envisioned in my head seeing kids and families running. I wanted to see kids running through the office. I wanted to see them in the play area. I wanted to see me talking to moms and dads, and it's mostly moms I worked with, but it was connecting with them and helping them break down the fear and help them understand there's so much fear. Especially when you become a parent. I mean, especially when you're pregnant. I mean, there's more fear there, I think, because you go to a doctor, it's always, oh, there might be this, oh, there might be that. And the chances are people don't know it's less than 10% and most of those things. And it's in a model that if we don't do things, a certain way, this is the model of why it's less than 10%. That's just in that model. If you step out of that model, the chances are even lower. But it was one of those things where just uplifting, empowering kids to return back to what they're naturally designed to be. My heart broke in 2017. I'll never forget this. It was the end of summer, and I remember the family was coming in and they were going to start care. And one of the kids, cute kid. I mean, it was autistic, I could tell, but it was really a cute kid. Just comes in, sits in our consult room. He goes, "Hi, I have autism, or I have autism." And I look. And what bothered me is that kid already put a label on itself and attached themselves to that label of what they are. My heart broke that day. I remember walking out of that office, and my office, we had a great day that day. She's like, "How are you doing?" I'm like, I gotta be honest, man, my heart sank. And she's like, "Why?" I'm like, "You remember so-and-so that came in?" She's like, "Yeah." I'm like, if I can't help shift that mindset, that kid is going to be stuck in the paradigms and the constructs and everything of what autism is. And they're going to become that, and they'll never break away no matter what they do. That's how powerful the mind is. And that's why, it's just within our own language. When we say we have something, you don't have anything.
Mm-hmm.
You just have an experience, and you can change that experience. And so that's where my vision that was just trying to help empower. But even when it came to pregnant women and so forth, it's just empowering them to understand what their body's capable of, or why we're seeing the issues we see when it comes to pregnancy, and what are the things we can do to reverse those things to help us get back to more of that state. But yeah, I was seeing that's where it all came from, because at the time when I was making this decision, here's December, we're planning this out. Okay, what our vision is. We didn't do anything. We just said, this is where we want to get to. I was seeing 5% patient volume at that time of kids. So that means from the age of 0 to 17, I only had 5% of my patients were in that bracket. I said, I want to be at 50%. That was my goal. In chiropractic, that's considered to be a very high percentage. And I was like, I just want to have 50%. So January comes, we're like, all right, we're going to start tracking. So we're at 5% in January, doing the work I just shared. It was just vision, feelings, all this other stuff that I teach my clients. In 6 months, I was at 48%. 48%. Now, if you want me to be very transparent, I did one workshop that related to kids, only one. We didn't get much. We had 2 patients that come from that. That did not create the 48%. But at the same token, it's that visioning and seeing things and knowing how we're going to move forward, what we're going to create, and just knowing that, like, I'm just going to trust that, God, universe, whatever is going to provide as long as I stay focused. It will bring to me as long as I stay focused. And there's principles I can get into, but that's kind of how we envisioned that practice shifting and changing to that way.
See, and I understand a little bit better than some people do, because we've been trying to break the stigma of the labels placed upon children and the labels placed upon our son from when he was younger in life, before he came to us. And so we've been trying to break the stigma of what he has associated himself with as well. And that has been probably the toughest battle on our field that we've been having to deal with. So I understand that, and I'm grateful to you, because it seems like it was a very holistic approach to all of that type of thought and processing. Going through that transition with your wife in the front office and everything, what did your leadership style look like? Like, how did you lead within that office, that environment, the families coming in? And then how did that transition over now to coaching?
I like that question. Yeah, it was one of those things where I have a vision. Maybe it's the title of the podcast. I have a vision of war. I've been watching a lot of movies that encompass like war in some way, but the leadership was just like, here's where we're going. And the thing is we're not going to allow anything to distract us. We're going to have bumps along the road. There's going to be things that are going to come up, but that's where we're heading. And who knows how long it's going to take. We're not going to put time frames on it. We're just going to move forward. We're going to keep focused on where we're at with things. And it was all mindset. So it was all about, like, keeping a certain focus on where we're going and how we're moving forward. So if a hiccup comes, hey, let's remember where we were. There was always a remembrance. Since it was just me and my wife, for the most part, we did have team members. We had massage therapists in there, but it was one of those things where it was just focusing on how we're going to move forward and not let anything interrupt our thought process, not anything disrupt where we want to go. And always remember the why we're shifting that way. And I'll never forget it because, things helped. It's not like you just make that decision, you go forth. Like for me, when I choose something, I know that there's going to be things that are going to come up. There's things that are going to challenge me. There's things that are going to shake in me. I may even get weak in the knees at some point. I don't know what those stuff are going to be. I don't try to create resistance to it. I try to accept it and walk into it. A lot of times people look at that and say, well, that's mental toughness. Now for me, it isn't, because mental toughness is you're creating this barrier to fight through things. I wasn't fighting. I was accepting. I was more like, bring it on, whatever that is. What I don't have my communication as perfect as I want it to be. Bring it on. I'm going to learn as I go. I'll master this communication so I can communicate better to moms. Because I did not see much pediatrics. So here I am. I understand the power of what chiropractic can do. I knew how to adjust kids already, but there's an art of communication I didn't have. And so I'm like, we're going to learn through this together. It's not having expectations. It was just, that's kind of how I was leading the path of just saying, this is where we're going to go and this is how we're going to do it. And maybe that's why we had that success. I couldn't really answer that. I don't know. I'm very grateful for what we had. I knew we had a purpose and we knew where we were going, and we go through. Again, I have vision of war coming in. Like you have the leader going and all of a sudden you're hearing about, we lost over here. Don't worry about it. Stick to your honor, stick to your truth, stick to your values, and keep moving forward. And that's what was our why. I was tired of seeing chronic illness rise. At that time, it was 53% in kids. I was hearing autism, 20 by 2032, 1 in 2 kids are going to be autistic, 80% boys. It's one of those things where I'm like hearing all these stats and then C-sections on the rise and this and that. And I'm like, not in my community. And I was like, I even did this at one point. I watched a C-section. And I would watch it, not every day, that'd be a lie, but probably like once a week in the beginning, just to fire me up, to know that I'm going to do everything in my power not to let that happen. Now, I'm not saying C-sections are bad, and I'm not trying to create guilt. Please don't go there. It's just they're needed, about 10% based on the research is about they're needed. But when you understand the stress that's put on mom, the baby, and then developmentally, there's a reason why they go through the vaginal canal. There's a lot of reasons why. So I always kept that in the back of my head, just keeping that why, keeping that remembering. We would do that in our quarterly meetings. Like we'll work on that. Sometimes it may have been, we had some monthly meetings that if it needed to come up, I would, but it was the quarterly for sure. Hey, let's remember why we're doing this. Let's remember why we exist and never forget that and keep moving forward. Because when we do deal with those struggles, whatever may show up, it's all going to be, we'll remember this why, and it'll get us through. It'll give us the energy and the inspiration when we don't have it. It'll give us hope when we don't have it. We have that faith to hold on to. And I don't mean faith from a religious standpoint. I mean an inner knowing of where we're going. And through that process, that led us to, seeing the success we had, to being one of the top biggest from a volume perspective, percentage perspective of pediatrics in Illinois. And I really don't, again, that's an ego thing when I say that. It's just sharing how we were so hardcore focused on this. But that kind of leads into then, our transition now into the coaching side, because you have to understand, my coaching business was not a full-time business. It was a side business on top of the other business. When COVID hit, I had to let that go. And I told my clients, whoever I was working with, I'm like, I'm going to stay with you guys and work with you guys. But at the same token, I'm not taking on any new clients right now, because I want to make sure my energy's keeping the office up and running. Because there's we didn't know we didn't know what was going to happen. But speaking on like what I'm sharing about my leadership skills, when COVID hit, I remember it was in March, because in February, I was telling my wife, January, February, I was kind of telling her where things are going to kind of move towards if it gets to this level. And by end of February, by the beginning of March, she's like, we may have to shut down. You're not worried at all? I'm like, not at all. I'm like, because again, what's our why? Why are we here? You go, think about it. Are moms going to be less stressed or more stressed? And I say moms just because 98 to 99% of the time I was working with moms when it came to their children. And I was like, there's going to be so much other things that are going to go on. We need to be the leader in educating them that and helping to inspire, to show them how chiropractic can help them adapt better, how they can see things differently, how not to be so consumed. I'm not even talking about the health benefits where, there's other things that can happen, like immune system and all these other. I'm just talking about stress and keeping their mind clear and so forth. And so when the hit came in April, we had lockdowns in Chicago. And if you guys don't know, Chicago is one of the hardest cities that had the biggest lockdowns. we were able to stay in business because I'm a primary care physician, and but we took a 40% hit that month. And it was kind of one of those things like when stuff's hitting the fan. Again, I'm thinking of like another movie. I can't remember what it is, but long story short, it's like things are going bad. I'm like, just hold, stay here, just stay calm. We got this. Just stay calm. We got this. And I'm like, well, everything's going to change. Don't worry about it. We made a couple of adjustments in the business. All of a sudden, in 2.5 months, we were back to, we actually broke a record. We were breaking records then from there on out because our new patients that were coming in, then plus our old patients that left, they were coming back. It was just a perfect pile on there. And we succeeded with that. But coming back to the story of me coaching, it was one of those things where it wasn't a full-time thing. So when my wife and I decided to move, we wanted to start a family. That's the biggest reason. We knew if we started a family in Chicago, we were never leaving. So what ended up happening was we decided, it was September 2021, where we looked and said, all right, we're gonna let this go. We had someone who potentially was going to buy, they backed out. And after that, we're like, I'm not playing this game anymore. We're going to let it go. We mapped out our plan of what we had to do. And then I was like, we're going to start a family because that's what we really want. And we're going to move. And everything did work out really, really well. My wife got pregnant instantly, first try. And literally, so it was one of those things where now my daughter's 3 months old now. So it's been a joy. But the point I'm trying to get at the story is, that wasn't our full-time, we didn't do coaching. I didn't do coaching full-time. So when I made that transition, I was like, we can do this. I mean, we have enough to hold on to here and there, but I really want to grow this business and really do that. And it's the same mentality I had when I was in the chiropractic office doing that. It's the same here. I don't know how this is going to go. This is a different beast for me because I know how to grow a business locally. That's what I did with mine. This is more non-local. So it's going to be a little different. There's going to be things I'm going to have to learn. There's going to be inner battles. There's fears I'm going to have to get through. I'm going to have to go through all of that. And I've been almost a year into this. And I'll tell you, there's been a lot of things that came up. Some stuff I thought I healed. And, but again, growing experience, I'm growing more as an individual. And, again, it's that inner knowing, that faith, but also seeing where I want to go and where I want to take this and why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's absolutely amazing looking at, those fears that were associated with the change, not knowing what you're going to do, not knowing stuff. Hey, I don't know this. And I know that one of the questions that you have in there is, why is the darkness our greatest ally? Right. And that kind of tunes into that. So I'll ask you, why is darkness our greatest ally?
It's one of the things we fear so much. And think, look what we did with COVID, right? It was so much uncertainty that was created in a lot of ways. And what do? We get fear. I mean, that's why I think one of the biggest fears humans have is uncertainty. But when you look at, I'll take a step back before I answer that fully. Think about a candle flame, right? Just something that's a simple old candle. When you have a well-lit room and you put a candle on, you're not going to notice the power of that candle. You're not going to learn anything about it. But if you take that same candle flame and you put it in a pitch black room, you get to see how really powerful that candle is. It starts to show you where its strength is and what it can do. That is us. We are that candle flame. And so to really understand and discover more who we really are, we have to go into the darkness. Darkness has always been our ally in every way because we came from the darkness to come into the light, called birth process. We go from death, we go into the dark to head back to the light. When it comes to life, when we step into the darkness, our darkness is just challenges, obstacles, our fears, our worries, limiting beliefs. There's many titles you can put on that. It's the things that make us uncomfortable. And the thing about the darkness is, if we can walk into it instead of resist it, it's going to show you more of your soul, your actual soul of who you are. It's going to help you rediscover your strength. So a lot of people, like, here's an example. I grew up in a very Italian Roman Catholic society. So I always heard people like, God, please give me strength, or God, please give me this, right? And as I got older, I was like, why? You're not just going to ask and it's given in that way. It's going to be, I've never seen it happen that way. I'm not saying it could. What I've learned over time is that if you ask God for strength, God's not giving you strength. I'm sorry. What he's going to give you obstacles to have you realize the strength you already have within you. If you look at all spiritual texts, they all talk about this stuff. Everything's within us. All things are within us. And so the darkness allows you to uncover that, because our mind thinks it has it all mapped out, what your issues are, what this is, and so forth. But when we get past mind and go into heart or body, same thing, all of a sudden we can learn and uncover what really is those root causes, and those things make us uncomfortable. Everyone has it. And it's knowing not to resist. The first time it happens, we want to resist. But the key thing is to accept and sit with it, which is the hardest thing to do. And I wouldn't say I knew this and how to perfect this when I was younger. I'm not going to say I perfected it. I have it perfected now. I'm human. There are things that will just shake me and weaken me sometimes, and I'll create up resistance. But I've learned I have systems in place now where it'll keep me in a self-check mode where it's like, hey, you're resisting over here. This is why it's bothering you so much. Why am I getting emotional here? Why am I getting triggered here? Well, there's resistance. Okay. There's something I've been suppressing. Oh, great. Let me go tap into that. And then I can clear and then go sit with this. And sometimes some things, I'll be honest, this work, I had a friend of mine say over time, he was like, man, the most intense work I've ever done is spiritual work. He goes, I'm blown how intense this stuff is. I'm like, yeah, it's not all the light, airy, and fluffy things that people say all the time when you hear about spirituality, right? And he's like, no, dude, he goes, I've been on this journey for like 6 years. It is the most intense work. I'm like, yeah, because it's bringing up stuff that you've been hiding for so long. It's the stuff that's covering our true essence of who we are, our light, our soul, whatever you want to call it. And that's why when we embrace the dark, then the darkness is going to reveal just a little something more of what's really within us. And then when we come out of that, we're going to be that much more empowered to go ahead and continue. I mean, even a diamond has to go into intense darkness with pressure and heat and everything else. I mean, a coal has to go through all that to create that diamond.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm guessing, I'm just going out on a limb here, but I'm pretty sure that you wrote a book called A Walk in the Dark. And I'm pretty sure that this is what that's all about, correct?
You're on your A game today, man. Look at you.
A game. I did my research, Dr. Vic. You don't even understand. I did my research. That's why I wanted to go down this path. It was this is what I've been wanting to talk about for a while with people. And you put it in such an elegant way of how you said that a candle cannot show its full potential until it goes into the darkness, right? You don't see what it fully has to offer until it's completely dark. It's in an environment where it is useful to be able to see these things. And you're right. I think that the issue is that a lot of people don't try to come out of the darkness as quickly as they get into the darkness, if that makes sense.
No, it totally does. And in the darkness too, just to tap into this, I forgot to mention this part. There's two types of identity. So identity with a small I and identity with a big I. Okay. Now somebody say, what's the difference? Well, the small I is your creation of your experiences of what you've been conditioned that create what you think is real. The big I is your true self. So what the darkness does is it breaks down the constructs. That's what when you're breaking down a construct of what you think you are or your identity, your ego has really conditioned in a certain way. Darkness is you're going to go into darkness because of that. But when you do that, you're going to learn a little bit more about the big I. And as long as you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable in this process. And when you do that, this is where you really understand who you really are and understand. I mean that from two realms, from the human realm of what your strengths are. But I also mean that from a spiritual perspective. You're actually literally tapping more in expressing, not resisting, but expressing that element of you that really wants to be experienced in this world. And it's just a beautiful thing. And this is what I did, when I said I had a 5-year growth, I hit my financial peak. When I said I stopped doing everything, this is when I said, I'm going to let life teach me. And in 1 year, I learned more practicing this than I did in the last 5-10 years because what the darkness gives you too, just one last thing, is it always gives you what you need. It's not, I have to figure something out. No, it's going to bring to you what you need to work on in this moment to where you want to go. And that's trust. You have to have that faith to know that life will do that for you because that's what it's designed to do. We're not here just to, have a human experience or whatever. We are, but it's also to learn. It's also to grow. It's also to expand our soul in some way, shape or form. And if it was all just same even keel, which, living comfortable, I don't think a lot of us would be here to want to come experience that.
Yeah. One of my good friends actually says it in this way. You have to be comfortably uncomfortable. You have to be comfortably uncomfortable. And I never really got the full impact of that statement until you were just now talking. So now I'm going to have to go back and have a good conversation with him about that. But you've mentioned it a few times about resilience and looking at it from that spiritual side and that spiritual resiliency. So how do you define spiritual resilience?
Yeah, spiritual resilience, it's one of those things where you know what your soul purpose is. Like, internally. It's not a figuring out. It's a feeling. Okay, this is the difference here, because a lot of times we think, because a lot of my work right off the bat, what I do with my clients is we need to figure out what your life purpose is. And life purpose is another word for soul's purpose. And a lot of times people get in their head. When they give me their first one, I'm always like, there's a lot of head energy here. There's not a lot of depth. And depth is what is a feeling. You have to feel what that is, because you're not. That's the thing that we're always focusing here, not down here in our heart center. But it's just knowing within, what is your soul's purpose? What's your gifts that you want to give to what your uniqueness is that you want to give to the world, and what you've come here to experience. So it's like knowing your truth, your purpose. And when you can do that, you can't be distracted anymore, as long as you stay focused on it. You can't be swayed in one way or another. When you tap into that kind of aspect, nothing's going to bother you. Well, I'm not going to say nothing's going to bother you. You're human. But it's one of the things where you're going to be able to overcome whatever comes, because you're going to learn from it. This is some people call a growth mindset, right? And I say that's just the same thing as just, from a spiritual context, we're always growing, learning, expanding. There's nothing bad. There's no failures. There's no losses. That's all from a spiritual context, but it's also a human context. It's just the only problem is our minds have been conditioned to what's win and loss, right? When you think of sports, I've had always people, when I share this, people always say, like, when I bring this up about there's no loss in life, and they're like, that's not true. I'm like, look at sports. I'm like, well, let's have that conversation. And they'll be like, yeah, look, the championship, they won. The other team lost. That's a loss for them. I'm like, no, it's not. I go, let's just shift the perspective and let's have that convo. They won a trophy. Woohoo, congrats. The team that lost, what do you think they learned? What do you think they gained? What did they win from that? They learned what their weaknesses were, where they failed at, that they can grow to be better and stronger. It's probably their weaknesses. Where are the things they have to improve on, and so forth. And as long as they keep their focus like that, you better watch out. There's going to come a day they're going to win that trophy, and they may win multiple. But there's no loss ever. It's just unfortunately that we when you see it in that way, then you'll see it that. But if you see it that it's something to teach you or something to help you become aware of, or again, going back, it's kind of like the darkness again. There is going to be the gifts that are going to help you.
Yeah, they're going to come back and win that trophy, unless, of course, you're the Los Angeles Rams. Sorry, I got to give it a dig. That used to be my team, but very good perspective on that. But can you tell us how you build that spiritual resilience within yourself? How do you do that within yourself and your family?
Yeah, one of the things is, and I have to give some of my credit to my mom. She kind of planted those roots a little bit, because when I was younger, she used to say, if you put your mind to it, anything's possible. Like, so as long as you put your mind to it, you'll make it happen. And it's funny, as I got older, that became my mantra. If I put my mind to it, anything is possible. But you have to understand, I looked at things from a perspective that, and again, that big pivotal moment in my life, you can understand I'm pulling a lot from there, because there's just so much that came from that. It was a big shift in my life, 2016, 2017, making that shift in my practice. Because I literally said, if I'm the creator of my life, then I should be able to create what success means and experience that. I should be able to create what fulfillment means to me and create that. And I should be able to then have that way of going and see that happen in the way that I kind of see it as that way. Because again, I'm going against the old model of you have to work hard, long hours, all this stuff, sacrifice, and I can go on and on with all that. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to work less, because there's something called the law of least effort. This has to be true. And so what I had to do was have faith. Now, I come from a very Italian Roman Catholic background, so faith was something that we held on to. But there wasn't one thing that did it. Sports did it for me. Working out did it for me. Lifting a weight I thought I couldn't do, and all of a sudden I kept going at it, and I did that. Or in baseball, try to be recognized. The Chicago Cubs, there was a movie, The Rookie of the Year came out, I think, like that, or something like that. Where was it, Rookie of the Year? Where a guy comes out of nowhere, he's like 30-something years old, late. He ends up being on the team. And he's a phenomenal pitcher, and he never played before. So sports teams back then were like, hey, let's do tryouts. You never know, we might find some undiscovered talent. And I remember my buddy and I we're gonna. I didn't want to go. I had friends of mine that were going, and I'm like, I'm not going to that. Forget that. And they're like, come on, just come, have fun. We're all gonna have fun. So we all played on the same team. So I was like, all right, let's go. I'll have some fun. Actually went against one of the guys they were scouting, and I was beating him and everything, which was kind of interesting. But again, it's knowing to. It's not something I was given. It was not something that I was like, oh, I just have this. It was one of those things where I guess, again, coming back to parent, this is all coming full circle. It's going back and looking at what my parents showed me. They were showing me a life I didn't want to have. And that became a drive to where I was like, I'm going to do everything in my power not to do that. And I'll learn as I go. But I was doing things very head-centered, human-centered, very that way. And then I had to learn how to step back into my power, which was getting back into my roots, where if I can put my mind to it, anything, it's going to happen. And that's something I want to instill in my kids. I want them to understand the power of what they really have within. When it comes to my family unit, it's the same kind of thing. Like, my wife is my biggest supporter. And every time when I have the fears come up and I talk to her, she's always like, if there's anyone I believe in you. If there's anyone I can believe they can do anything, it's you. Like, they get that kind of support only reinforces. Now, I'm not going to say her saying that is absolutely beautiful. Does it hit the moment where it's like, yeah, I get that confidence? No, but then again, I sit back and when I get clear headed again, it's like, man, it's so great to have that support system. And I get into a beautiful state of gratitude because of that. And that just that's how her mentality is. It's how our mentality is when it comes to our life. So I wouldn't say it was like one thing, but we just took what we have in our life and we just, every little piece that has taught us something builds the confidence to be like, this is, we can choose and we can have that experience. And, when you look back on your life, you've had these moments. Everyone has. I had them. I got a kid who came, from blue collar family and blue collar community. And, and I was like, well, man, I've never really had money. I don't know what that looks like. And I went back and it was like, where's my small victories where that was? I was, when I was in high school, I had a little job making $8 an hour, $9 an hour. You know what? I never had to worry about money. I mean, I was able to cover my bills. I was able to put gas in my car. I was able to go out and have fun with my friends. I didn't have to worry. It was there. But I'm like, but when I got in the business, the worry came. But it was fascinating to look back and see where have been moments in my life where I chose what I wanted to experience and I succeeded. In other words, life is always going to work out. It always works out. Some way along the line, it always works out. And that helped me because when I look back at my life, seeing how things worked out, even in the moments where I thought they weren't, they actually did. Or maybe I thought they didn't work out in that way, but later down the road, it actually benefited me more. That all helped build that spiritual resilience to get to a point, like literally to move my family to Tennessee and be like, we're going to live the life because of what we want to create for ourselves and how we want to do that. This is a whole nother test. And we created this. My wife and I both have done this. And we're like, we're going to start a family. What do you mean? You let go of a business, which was doing well. You did anything you wanted. And now you're letting that go. You're moving out of state. Your wife's pregnant, right? And to now we're at a point where we're just like, it was all worth it. Every step of it was worth it. Look what we learned. Look how stronger my wife and our relationship got even stronger. We were already strong, but now it's even stronger. And now we understand each other even more on a deeper level. So it's that you have to challenge yourself in those ways and do small ones. Too many people do big ones and then it fails and they're like, oh, forget this. This isn't for me. Do the small victories. You got to do them a little at a time. I've been working on this since I was like 12 years old, 13 years old. Sports is where it started. Working out in sports is where it started. And then when I got to college, I remember I was like, I'm going to put all the pressure on me to learn and do this. So it was school, not only in college, but chiropractic school also to succeed in there. And then it became, okay, well, now I'm going to challenge myself to be an amazing chiropractor. And I wanted to be successful in 3 years. It took me 5 years, but guess what though? I did it. And then I was like, okay, fine. I did this. Let's take 40% off the top and let's go ahead and try to do this in another way. And then I did that. And then it was like, okay, well, we created a big pediatric office now. We didn't even do anything to make that happen. And then it was like, okay, well, now it's coming to the point of now I want to get into coaching more because I have a big vision. I want to serve the world in a bigger way than what I was. Yeah, we're going to have to do a little bit of, taking a hit here per se, but we're going to learn things from there. We're going to grow. And I know we're going to get back there. We will. And it's beautiful because now almost a year later, like I said, we are growing and we're getting there. And I found what my message is, what my voice is in my space. I had a thought of what it was going to be. And if I always tell people, go back in the beginning of the year and you'll see what I was talking about. Now look at what I talk about now. And you can just pay attention to the energy difference. You can tell I'm coming from a deeper presence because that's what really matters to me now. And now I'm presenting in this way because that's my mission and purpose. It aligns with my soul's purpose. And it's a beautiful process. So you got to take those small little steps to build that confidence to do it. It's not something that's just like, oh yeah, I'm a creator of my life and I create everything I want. Done. Let's do it. And everything just works out. Your brain doesn't work that way. You got to give it little things at a time to hold on to. Work with your ego, work with your mind, work with that small eye and connect the dot to the bigger eye. And that way it's a marriage that you want to create. So that way you're expressing and understanding your true self while you're working through the stuff to continue to do that.
Yeah, and I think those are all great examples of how you have been and lived through life situations, utilizing that spiritual resilience, utilizing those different types of aspects, moving from the little I, working on the little I to get to the big I. I love that concept. I love what that looks like. Now, you have authored now 3 books, correct? And your
Sure.
latest one that just came out in May is called Decoding the Matrix: Powerful Tips for Unleashing Your Potential and Accelerating Your Spiritual Awakening. Why don't you run us through each of these different books and just kind of give us a brief concept of what that looks like? Decoding the Matrix, Rediscover Your Greatness, and A Walk in the Dark.
Yeah, let's do it. So my Rediscover Your Greatness was my first book. And it's things I kind of been talking about, like we're 2016, 2017. If I'm going to choose my success, what does that look like? What's the rules of life? How do I play in this game? And so in the book, it talks about who are you really? Breaking that down. I even say in the first chapter, I'm like, this is like multiple books I should be writing off this, but I'm going to try and nail it in one chapter and just give you the synopsis of who you really are. Then we talk about the law of focus. We get into how words define a reality. And it's really just using different perspectives of life to have you understand that greatness of who you are. You have it already within you. It's just there's rules to life and everything. And there's rules, everything. You look at how we live in our, how you have to live as a human being, how you live in a town. There's things you can do, not do. I'm a chiropractor. There are things I can and cannot do, all these different things. Well, there's rules to life also. And if we can understand them better, then we can be a better player in the game called life. And that's what that book is all about and directing you to there. A Walk in the Dark, we already kind of dived into that one, but it's really just understanding how the darkness is your greatest ally. But more importantly, too, what is the one thing that creates all struggle in a human life? Because as I looked at all the struggle and all the different things that we face, there is only one element, and I could share it here, but it's called resistance. And when we resist things, it's going to persist. And so I dive a whole chapter into that, about that concept and so much more. My whole purpose of that book was to help break away, to stop the end of mental suffering. That's what it all was about. And if I can get people to shift their perspective, what we talked about, the darkness already, and you can see it in how I explained it, you can't suffer anymore. It's not going to exist anymore. I'm not going to say you're going to go through painful moments. You will. That is going to be there for the rest of your life. In the East, they call it suffering. So, but in the West, we say, well, there's pain and then there's suffering. In the West, we've broken that down a little bit more. So for those who are very East philosophically, it'll be like, hold on, the struggle is always supposed to be there. It's part of life. I understand that concept, but it's the pain is where I'm going to. That's, you can't control that, but you can't control the struggle. If you can see it in a different light, it's going to change your life. Decoding the Matrix is all about the conditioning of the mind and the matrix. The matrix is the human collective consciousness of humanity. So what does that mean is if you averaged every human out with their consciousness level of where they are, that can be also termed as a vibration. And what that makes up is just what their mind, what their thoughts are, their emotions are, and what they're focusing on. If you average every human out, that creates the matrix. Now there's sub matrices underneath that and so forth, like countries and states and towns and cities and all those things. But how does that influence our mind? How does it program into our subconscious? And how does it put us into a mental prison? That's the first part of the book. The second part, I dive into what is your potential? How do you know what your potential is? And I share some principles of what I do with coaching clients to help you to cultivate that. And then the third part of the book is going to be, why is it so critical for you to live your potential? What does that mean for you on your spiritual path? What is spiritual awakening? What are the 4 stages that most people go through in there? Some people have 5, some have 8. I went with 4, it's simple and easy. But long story short, the importance of you living your potential and getting to that bigger I, as we were talking about. What does that mean for humanity? And what are you doing to help shift the world? Because in the world we live in, we think we have to do to change things. If it's a political issue or an issue with equality, whatever the issues are, doesn't matter. I can go on 1,000 of them. But the issue is not that, because we think we have to do to change that. And really, it's a being element. And when you understand this principle, then you learn to be a better player in this game called life, and how you can actually use your true power, use your power of influence in a way that aligns with universal laws and quantum physics and laws of, all these other things, than going what we've been doing, which is doing to think we're going to make a change. And if we never change the element of us, then we don't affect the matrix. And if we don't change us and we don't affect the matrix, the problem will never be solved. It goes against all laws. It's not my rule. I didn't create these rules. Some people get mad when I say these things. I'm like, I'm just sharing the things that have existed for 5,000, 6,000 years that have been said. This is not my rule. I didn't create this, but I've studied them and I've learned them and I've applied them in my own life and I've seen changes. And it's the same concept, because then from there, we, through the law of association, can start to create a ripple effect of ourselves, which hopefully then liberates others to give them the opportunity to do the same, which is liberate themselves and free them from the mental prison so they can express more of their true self.
Wow. That sounds awesome. and in thinking about it and looking at it, I think I'm probably going to purchase A Walk in the Dark first, just simply because of the connection that I have with it. Right. And I think that there's a lot there that I'm going to dig into because of the story of what we have going on in our house. So I think that's a great aspect. Now, I know that authors don't typically like to do this. They like to promote their own books, which is why I got that out of the way with you, Dr. Vic. But what is a book recommendation or book recommendations? Because I see your bookshelf back there, book recommendations that you have for listeners.
Yeah, I know. I get it. I have to authors all the time, because I talk with authors, and it'll be like, "Oh yeah, my book should be the first one I recommend." I'm always like, "You're not the only teacher in this world. We can learn from everyone else. I only teach a fabric of what I know." But there's a few books. I'll share some that have been the most pivotal in my life that has helped me drastically. There are so many more I can go into, but I'll share three of them, and one of them I call is my Bible. Again, I'm very spiritual in everything I do. That is just the purpose of my life. If it's not spiritual, I don't do it. If it does not fulfill my soul and make me feel lighter and vibrant, more bliss, and a better human being, then I don't not do it. But a book called A Conversation with God by Donald Neil Walsh. He has 4 parts to it now. I haven't really read the 4th one that well, just to be honest, but I read the first 3. It is like an element to questions that it literally, the way he wrote that, there are questions that he's asking God that you probably have asked yourself. Like you thought about it in some way, shape, or form, and how life works. He goes down the far end, very far, very deep into the spiritual aspect, but he also shares practical things that we can understand as humans and how to be a better species. I love the book so much. My wife and I took our wedding vows from there. There's a portion of his wedding vows, and we took them and we modified them, because a lot of times wedding vows, till death do us part, and all this other stuff, right? My wife and I looked and we said, we're not going to control or anything. I forgot what it says in there. I have them written down. They're very long, by the way. But long story short, it's one of those things, like we talked about supporting each other throughout our whole entire process. And then our goal is to be with each other to our entire life. But if for some reason it's not, we're going to support each other in that too. What wedding vows have that stuff? That's true support. It's not holding someone into a prison. But long story short, phenomenal book, highly recommend it. Second book, which was very pivotal for me to understand consciousness levels, was Dr. David Hawkins' work. I love his work. Studied everything. But the power versus force. Power is the element of what I've been talking about, the essence of who we really are. Force is forcing things to try to make things happen. When we're doing, we're forcing. When we're being, we're in our power. And he maps out everything from religions to music to all this. He's constructed all the consciousness levels of everything through his 28, 29 years of research. Highly recommend the book. You're going to understand consciousness levels at a deeper level. The third book, I was very surprised how much this was going to influence my life. I have to read this again. I remember I was 21 years old in human resource class, and I was mandated to read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And I was like, come on, man, I don't want to read another book. What do I got to read this book for? He made us read 3 books that had nothing to do with our curriculum. And I remember at the end of the semester, I gave him a hug and appreciated him, because what it taught me was so much. But the biggest thing, as everybody knows, is, know your why, overcome every how. I know he didn't say that. He said something else, but it's very similar to that. And how you have to have a why. But one of the things I got from that book that I didn't realize till later in my life, you talk about planting a seed and you don't pay attention to it later. And I didn't even know it. I had to go back. I remember I reread it when I was in my late 20s. And he talked about in there, when at certain times of the book, he had to trust an inner knowing, like not to do something. Everybody was saying, this is going to be fine. We're going to survive, whatever. And in the concentration camps, and he just trusted something else. And I was like, man, that was there all the time. And I missed that message. I got so hooked on the why to overcome the how, mental toughness, mental resilience, all that stuff. I went on the force side of that instead of the power side of that quote. But at the same token, and this was even more profound, because then it became, Even though I was doing this in my life, I didn't realize I didn't trust it 100%, to trust my intuition, to trust that feeling 100%. Don't question it. And in my life now, I do. And it's fascinating. So those are the 3 books I'd recommend. They've changed my life. There's so many other ones I can go into, but but those are the top 3 that I would say.
So we're on episode 42. And I swear over half of the individuals I've had on, and you're now the 3rd in a row that have mentioned Man's Search for Meaning.
It's a powerful book, man. I'm telling you, I want to go back and read, because now with all my knowledge on mindset, neuroscience, and all that, because the first half of the book is the story, the second half is the psychoanalysis part. And I'm like, man, I would love to I need to go into that psychoanalysis part and reread it. That's why I'm like, I need to go back and reread that book.
Hey, Dr. Vic, thank you so much for today. Do you have any final words for our listeners?
Trust that everything will always work out for you. The universe is always there. It's always there to support. God's always there, whatever you want to call it. All you have to do is just make sure you keep your vibration, which is your thought and emotions, at a higher state. That's your work. That's the true grind and hustle of life. It seems easy but it's really, in this day and age, there's a lot that can pull us off, but that's the key factor to it. If you can do that, everything's going to work out in your favor always.
Well, we are grateful for you for imparting into us the knowledge and giving us a different perspective to look for and to look through. And we will have snippets. We will actually send people to your website so they can actually look you up, do more research, look into who you were as an individual, as well as we will have links for each of your books, which can be purchased through Amazon. And we are just thankful to have you here in this moment, to take the time out from your 3-month-old daughter. Congratulations for that, by the way. And
thank you.
After this transition move, almost a year now of living in the mountains, thank you for this time that you've put into us today.
Thanks for having me, brother. This was a lot of fun.
Hey, so today's episode is only possible thanks to my friend and producer, G. Frazier with 369sounddesign.com. Jeff is the one who has the hardest job of anyone on the team. And he let me know again last week how hard it really is to actually make me sound good. We are blessed by the entire team here at the Wartime Leadership Podcast. See you next time. Be blessed.